Hi, welcome to PegLuksik.online. I'm your host, PegLuksik, and this is episode 2 in our Teaching at Home mini-series. Today, we're going to be talking about the do's and don'ts of teaching at home in a very general sense. So let's get started. Let's start with a do. Do believe in yourself. You know, a lot of times I hear parents say, I don't know how to teach. I can't teach my child anything. That's just not true. If your child is speaking to you, you taught them a language. Think about when you were in school and you had to learn French, German, Spanish, whatever your second language was in school, and how difficult it was to learn that. And for many of us, nearly impossible because most Americans don't speak more than one language. But we all speak one, and we learned it from our parents. So if your child is speaking to you in intelligible sentences, you will have already successfully taught a complete language to your child. You taught them grooming, manners, how to feed themselves, how to get dressed. You've taught your child an enormous amount of information and skills to get them through every day. So in fact, the statement that you are your child's first and best teacher is absolutely correct. Now you're just going to be teaching them in a more structured way. But believe in yourself and in your ability to communicate with your child. You've been doing it for years and you've been doing it successfully. This is just one more method of communicating with your child. If you believe in your ability, they will too. You know, there's an old saying about how wild animals can smell fear. Yeah, so can kids. So if you don't believe in yourself, they won't believe in you. If you do believe in yourself, they'll believe in you too. And they want to. They're rooting for you. They're your biggest cheerleaders. So the first do is believe in yourself. The first don't is don't wing it. Don't sit down every day with, well, you know, we'll just kind of work our way through something. That is a recipe for disaster. Before you start, think to yourself, what do I want to accomplish? Now, your child may or may not accomplish those things. Children are not widgets where you're going to meet this standard to get off the assembly line. Children don't work like that. But as the adult in charge, you should plan and prepare for what do I want to do today? Do I want to focus on multiplication tables? Maybe I want to focus on syllables. Maybe I want to focus on an art project. Whatever it is that you want to focus on, think about it ahead of time. Don't sit down in the school space at the school time and start making it up as you go along. Think ahead. What is it I want to do in this day and in this week, and maybe in this whole time period? What do I want to accomplish? So that you are always aiming yourself at a goal. You know, if you have no plan, you'll never succeed. So you have to start with, in your own mind, think about, what do I want to accomplish in this time that we have together? Maybe we want to read a book and talk about it. The plan is, I can't give you those pieces of information because I don't know your children, but you do. So think about ahead of time, what is it I want to accomplish? And then, do I have the pieces that I need to get that done? Winging it is always a recipe for disaster. So plan ahead. Plan for the day and then the week ahead. So you know what it is you want to finish and get through that week. Now, your child may not actually succeed at that, or they may go beyond your plan. Both of those things are fine, and they happen in every classroom every day, believe me. But the best teachers have a goal in their head. They are aiming towards something. You need to aim towards something as well. So don't wing it. Think about what you want to accomplish. Now, I know for some of you, your schools or school districts are actively involved in helping you with support and goals and tests and information, and that's wonderful. But I also know for some of you that's not happening. So if that's not happening for you, you can do this. Just sit down and think about it ahead of time. Plan what you want to do in the next day and in the next week. Let me give you a real simple example. You've done it with your children if they're anywhere beyond third grade. Every week you get a list of spelling words, and the spelling test is every Friday. So you know that every week you're going to have to get through this many spelling words, and they're going to have to be able to produce them by Friday. Now, all the children don't produce all the words. No child produces all the words all the time, but the teacher says we are aiming at communicating the correct spelling for this many words every week. And so during that week, she focuses on those words and activities and practice that reinforces and helps the children be able to learn those words. She has a goal in mind. These are the words I want to communicate this week. That's what I mean. Think about what you want to do today and then this week, and then set out how you're going to do it. Winging it never works, so don't wing it. So now we have a do believe in yourself, and we have a don't wing it. Do watch the clock. The clock is your friend. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more today because it is so critically important. If you want, for example, your child to finish a worksheet, you've given them a piece of, a math book page to do, and you're going to walk away and let them do it because that's good for them, set a timer. I want you to finish this page in 5 minutes. Now, I made up the task and I made up the time, but you get it. It keeps you focused and it keeps them focused as well. Because remember, a home is not a school. You may have other children who are saying, hey, mom, or hey, dad, the phone rings, somebody comes to the door. There's lots of interruptions that happen in homes that we screen out for to some measure in schools. So setting the timer like that, when you give a child a task and say, I want you to do this much in this much time, it keeps you from sort of losing track of what happened, and it keeps them focused as well, especially if your children are not good at self-regulating, at self-disciplining. They tend to get distracted. They tend to, their mind and their eyes wander off and they're somewhere else. That timer in front of them lets them know, it's like a leash. I need to finish this. I need to focus on this. I need to pay attention to this. The same with break time. Children get frustrated. I don't know why we don't recognize that, because we recognize that in adults, that we've all had the experience as adults where we've tried and tried and tried, and we're now to the point that if we do not walk away right now, the next thing we're going to do is pick up a hammer and break whatever it is. And so we know as adults, sometimes the best thing to do is to get up and walk around the room, close our eyes, have a cup of coffee, whatever, get away from the task. Children get frustrated too. And because they're smaller than we are and they do not have the same amount of self-discipline that we do, it is not uncommon for children to get frustrated with a task that they can't do immediately. And it is absolutely appropriate to give them a break, just like you give yourself a break. You know what? We just need to step away from this for a little while. That's where you set the timer as well, because it's easy for that 5-minute break, and an hour later you're thinking, oh, I never got back to that because 10 other things happened. The timer is your friend. So if you're going to give them a task to do, especially if your child has some trouble self-regulating and focusing, that timer lets you and your child know there's a time limit here. I need to finish this by this time. The timer is your friend in breaks, because then break time doesn't become, it's 3 hours later and now it's too late to come back and I've just wasted a day. So do use a timer to help keep you and your little one on task, and then it allows you to give them breaks, because that's the next do. Do pay attention to how well they're focusing. You have good days and bad days. You have good minutes and bad minutes. You get frustrated. So do they. So pay attention to that and work with them around that. And if they need a 5-minute break, give it to them. The world will not end if you take a 5-minute break in the middle of your school time. It's absolutely acceptable to do that, and sometimes it's super beneficial to do that. Don't continue on something if they have so reached their frustration level. There is tomorrow. And sometimes, when I was a kid, my mom used to say, let me sleep on that. And I always thought that was a big cop-out, that she was ignoring me or not paying attention to me. And then I became a grown-up. And I realized sometimes sleeping on it is actually a really good thing to do, because it gives your mind time to process information and think about it. And the next day you come back fresh. And oftentimes you see things you didn't see the first day. There is always a tomorrow. If your child hits a wall, stop. Just stop. Change subjects, or we're ending school today. You're done for the day. We, as adults, we know when we're done for the day. There are definitely times when children are done for the day. So even if you didn't finish what you thought you were going to finish today, that's okay. You can come back tomorrow and pick it up fresh. And that is not a negative thing. Don't allow interruptions. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more today. When you're planning your school time, don't put lunch in the middle, especially if the child is small and you only have to do an hour and a half to 3 hours a day to get it all done. Put it in the morning or in the afternoon. If you put a break in the middle, you just wasted about a half an hour after the break, especially with little ones, because it takes them time to get back into the rhythm of what they're doing. So put it all in the morning or put it all in the afternoon, depending on what's good for you and your child. And we talked about that in the last session. But don't schedule lunch in the middle, because that's a hard break and it's hard for them to get back into the focus of what they're doing. Plan for siblings. Many of us have more than one child. And if you have a first or a second or a third grader, they may be the oldest of their siblings. 2-year-olds don't respond well to I'm busy, come back in an hour. That really doesn't happen with a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. And if you're potty training, you have to stop. So work around, think about, well, do the younger children actually take naps? Then put school in the middle of nap time. And I know a lot of parents who do that, because then you're not ignoring the smaller ones, but you're able to focus on the school child without an interruption. If you are tag teaming, if there's 2 parents, sit down and talk about who's the school parent right now, and then the other one takes responsibility for the rest of the children. If you have children who are all in school and they're multiple ages, remember, as they get older, they should be able to work more independently. So start with the older ones, lay out the tasks you want them to do, and then fit the younger one into their independent time. Now, remember, we started with believe in yourself. I understand that there's one of you and there may be multiple children and you're trying to do school for all of them. So you're not going to be able to be perfect. You are going to have to make accommodations. But you know what? That's also a life skill that you're teaching your children, because I don't know anybody who has a perfect life. I don't know anybody who gets through a whole day. I did my whole plan without an interruption and it was perfect. No, that's why there's the saying about how life happens in the middle of what you planned, because it doesn't work the way you think. So think about how you can accommodate to keep the interruptions to a minimum, but understand sometimes you're going to get interrupted. And that's okay, because helping your child to learn how to deal with and refocus after an interruption is also a life skill, and one that's very important for them to learn. So do the best you can, but don't get crazy. Remember that you're going to make mistakes. Nobody gets it right the first time, every time. I don't know anybody who's ever done that. So sometimes the day's going to blow up on you. That's okay. You can come back tomorrow and start fresh. Sometimes the first hour goes badly and the second hour goes really, really well. That's okay too. Some children, almost all children actually, do really well at some subjects and then they struggle with others. Well, when you're the teacher, it's easy to internalize when they're struggling that it's your fault. No, it's not. We all have individual strengths and weaknesses. We all have specific talents, things we do well and things we don't do so well. And like everybody else, we want to do the things we do well all the time, and we don't want to do the things we don't do well ever. So we tend to gravitate to the things we like and avoid the things we don't. Well, they really do have to learn all the subjects. So you're going to have subjects that are a bigger struggle. That's okay. You're allowed. You do, and they do too, and that's not a reflection on you. It's okay. Work your way through those. You want to move toward independence. So with the smaller children, you're going to be much more interactive, but you really do want to move them as they are able into doing things by themselves. It's good for them to do that, and it makes you a lot less crazy. So when they're in first grade and second grade, it's appropriate to say, okay, now we've talked about this topic and here's your worksheet and I'm putting it down in front of you and I will be back in 3 minutes to see how you're doing. For a first grader, 3 minutes is a really long time. Set the timer and come back in 3 minutes. Make sure you're back in 3 minutes. And in the beginning, they may have 2 problems done and that's okay. Good. Now let's see if we can do a couple together and then refocus them and walk away again. As they get older, make the task a little bigger and the time limit bigger. Your goal is to move them to being able to do this more independently. They're supposed to be learning it. If you're doing it all, then they're not learning it. And that brings me to my final point for today's session. Don't allow guessing. You know, we all raised children, and when they were 2, they said, me do it, or some version of that. Whether it was tying their shoes or buttoning a coat or pulling up a zipper, and you're standing there waiting, and you know it's going to take them 15 times as long, and in the end, they're going to turn around to you and ask you to do it anyway. And so we all kind of, in the interest of time and being able to continue the family moving, often say, no, mommy will do it, or daddy will do it, it's okay. You watch, I'll help you. And when they push on, no, I'll do it, we all say, I'll help you. And that's appropriate when they're 2 and 3 and 4 and they're learning tasks that are difficult. But when you're teaching reading and they come to a word they don't know and they stop and they look at you and they're waiting for you to feed them the word, or the word is marshmallow and they look at the M and say moon. And you say, no, that's marshmallow. They didn't learn to read that word. What they learned was that if they waited, you would supply it. And as a parent, it's really hard not to do that. Don't let them guess. Don't do it for them. If that means you sit in silence for 3, 4, 5 minutes, well, you sit in silence for 3, 4, 5 minutes. And those first couple times are going to feel like it's 7 hours. And they're going to be looking at you, why aren't you helping me? Because parents help. But in this case, if you're doing it, they're not. And if they're not learning how to do it. And this is a really hard thing. Don't allow them to guess. Don't allow them to stop and look at you for the answer. And if you're like most parents, the first 6 times you give the answer without even thinking about it because you want them to feel good and to move along. But what you just taught them was they don't actually have to read the word on the page. They just have to look at you and you'll read it for them. And that's not reading unless you plan to do that until they're 75 years old. They're not reading. So you need to stop. Silence works. Just wait. You can say, do you want to sound it out with me? You can say, let's talk about how many syllables. You can say, that doesn't look like that word. It looks like something else. Did you want to try it again? Don't allow them to guess and don't supply the answer. It's going to be hard to do. The sooner you get into that habit, the sooner they will learn to do it themselves. If you start supplying or rewarding guessing, you're going to have a really hard time breaking it. So don't let them get in the habit of allowing you to do the work for them. Silence seems like forever in the beginning. It works. Wait them out. You'll be really glad you did. Next time, we're going to start talking about some content things that you can do in reading, either if you're on your own or to supplement what some schools and school districts are doing. Some are being very complete, some are incomplete. So what I'm trying to do is give you things that you can focus on either completely or around what other folks can do. And until then, this is PegLuksik.online, and I'm your host, Peg Luksik.